business at the federal or state level happens, you have to deal with it. And so I just really want to thank you for the opportunity to be here. I got into the race for governor because I really believe there's huge opportunities ahead of us, and I'm anxious tonight to hear the questions, and I'll describe a lot of those ideas and thoughts that I have about where Alaska could be in the next 10, 20 years. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you very much. So we're going to also give you an opportunity, as Governor Walker just answered the first question. What's important to you? Please describe your views on local control, unfunded mandates, and the obligation to maximize local self-government.
Well, first off, as a former mayor, local control is what it's about at the end of the day. We understand, when I was in the mayor's office and 10 years on the Anchorage Assembly, we understood very quickly the actions we took every single day had direct effect to the individuals. And if you did the wrong thing, you all know this, you'd end up at the grocery store and harassed about everything, even when you didn't make that decision. They would remind you that you need to do better. Local control is an important part. There are lots of opportunities in state government. I was just in Sitka, and there's an incredible effort that the tribe is doing there with regards to one of their labs they work on in regards to fish stocks and making sure that they have quality stock around the region. They're a great partnership that we should be doing with the state. When I think of opportunities in road maintenance and street maintenance, and Anchorage is a great example. When I was mayor, we took over the local street light management for the state because we knew how to do it better. We knew what lights need to be repaired quicker. We manage it on a one-to-one basis. So from my perspective, it's very simple. The more we can work with local governments is important. Mandates are a big problem. And I can tell you, as governor, one of the things I will be watching very carefully. Legislature loves to pass legislation, then wipe out the fiscal note because they want to pass it, not pretend they're conservative. And the reality, what that really means is you all, we all, taxpayers, pick up the bill. As governor, you have to be strong about it and say no. And if it means vetoing the bill that really puts a mandate back on local governments and property taxpayers, you need to push back. That's something I know has to be done more often, because every time I look at legislation, they do this trick at the end of the day. The Finance Committee pulls that out, and everyone says, oh, it's a great bill, it's going to be great. They put it on their brochures, and then we all pay the price later on. So you'll find me as someone who's going to be aggressive about it and not be afraid to veto a bill that puts a mandate back on local government when they haven't thought it out or paid for it.
Thank you, Senator. We're going to have the second question begin with you, and we'll just go back and forth in that manner. The second question is, what measures would you take to fully fund the Alaska Permanent Dividend Fund, if any?
I've laid out a proposal. It's on my website. I'd encourage folks to take a look at it, baggage.com, but here's what it is. You have two proposals out there. One you have, and I'm sorry that Senator Dunleavy isn't here because he has a plan to do a full-funded permanent fund dividend, but it cannot be sustainable, and it will not be able to supply long-term, on an ongoing basis, a dividend of any kind. The current one that's been passed in the legislature still leaves in the hands of the legislature, which makes me very nervous. What this means is every session, they'll debate how big the dividend is, instead of focusing on the big issues of education, public safety, trying to make our governments run more efficiently. So my proposal is, again, taking the money that's in the earnings reserve, which is about 18 billion of it, taking about 10 to 14 of it, put it into the constitutionally protected corpus of the fund so politicians can't touch it. Leave the rest for a transition. Then take the POMV, the percent of market value. I'll take that formula. I think it's a little high, but let's just take that formula. 50% of it constitutionally guaranteeing a sustainable dividend. That would have been about 1,900 this year. But the other half, the other 50%, I would also put in as a substitute for general fund for education. Because every single year, the legislature debates education at the end of the year. And what do? They usually trade it off, and all of us, again, on the local governments, pay the price of what's going on. And what I want to make sure is put that education aside, use 50% of the POMV, dedicate it. It will take a voter approval to do that. And then you take both the dividend debate off the table, and you also take education off the table so we can get on with other things. Otherwise, what happens, again, at the end of the session, they do some bargaining like this year. You're never going to see pink slips in an election year. But you will be seeing them in the future if we do not get a sustainable level of education funding for the school district around the state.
Thank you, Senator Begich. Governor Walker, please.
One of the most difficult decisions I've ever made was the decision to leave a portion of the permanent dividend funds in the dividend account, to grow that account, when it became obvious that we needed to draw from that account for two things for the first time, a dividend and a portion of funding state government, it was very clear we needed to grow the dividend itself to as much as we could. You know, if we had proposed 3 years ago, and put in another $14 billion would have been put into the dividend itself, into the fund, and that would have been enough to close the gap today. We would not have a gap today. Unfortunately, that did not take place. The dividend itself needs to be as high as possible and be sustainable. You know, I look at it's a similar situation to how we deal with fish. You know, if we fished every stream without paying attention to the returns, we'd have some high years, but then in the future we wouldn't. And so it's a sustainable. It has to be sustainable. I don't find it objectionable for it to be constitutionalized for the minimum. I don't want there to be a cap in there, though. I don't want there to be a range. I think the fine to have a base, but you know, we have to. If we don't look out for the long picture and long run, and we don't look at the vision of Alaska, it's got to be part of a full fiscal plan. You just can't deal with just one-offs. You've got to have the whole fiscal plan together. What we proposed was 9 pieces. We felt it needed to be fair and equitable across the board, and none were passed. You know, we had 500 public hearings and meetings, town hall meetings on the sustainability of the permanent fund. There were hearings in Juneau. It was very difficult. And finally, they did pass Senate Bill 26 this year. Not everything we wanted. We wanted more, but I think one thing you learn there is you get what you can and you live for another day and continue to harvest what's available next time. We didn't get the sustainability. We did not get the guarantee that we had hoped for, but we did get the division in such a way we're able to close 80% of the gap and yet still have a sustainable permanent fund in the future so that we'll have permanent fund dividends into perpetuity.
Thank you, Governor. We'll have our third question. We'll begin with the governor with this. Please rank the following AML priorities: PERS reform, K through 12 and university education funding, fiscal policy, capital infrastructure projects.
Well, I'll start with certainly, obviously, K through 12 is, I mean, pre-K education is really absolutely very critical. There's no question about that. I know the PERS issue is something that has hung over local government for a long time. And that 22%, whether it's going to go higher than 22% or not, that needs to be resolved so that there's not that fear, concern out there that's going to happen. You know, on infrastructure, capital budget, I'd love to have a capital budget. It's hard to have a capital budget when you have a $3.7 billion deficit, and that's what we walked into when oil went to $26 a barrel. We're still not done. We're still $700 million short of a full fiscal plan. We had a plan. We have a plan for a capital budget. That's critical going forward to keep our contractors working and Alaskans working. On the university, university funding, some locales when they went into recession, Texas is an example, they put they doubled down on universities and put more into the university system at that point for more education. Education is an investment that always will pay a return, and something that. But again, when you're in a huge deficit situation, we're living on borrowed funds. Unfortunately, $14 billion was drawn down by the legislature before they finally adopted the structured draw from the earnings reserve. So I look at that $14 billion. You know, we have a $1.8 billion deferred maintenance. My goodness, what an opportunity that would have been to get all of our deferred maintenance taken care of. That didn't happen, unfortunately. I think we've got to do that. Deferred maintenance is a debt unpaid, and it grows every year, just like a debt on a mortgage, because if you don't pay it off, it's more expensive the next year to do that. So the nice thing about deferred maintenance is bite-sized projects all over the state of Alaska, putting lots of local contractors, a lot of local folks to work.
Thank you, Governor. Senator Begich.
Thank you very much. I think as you described it, the ranking, a K through 12 pre-K education, this is the backbone of any great state, any great economy. If you have a system that's collapsing, and we're now number 46 in the nation out of 50, that does not build the future for Alaska. When you have young people who are not staying here because they don't see their future, again, we don't have the future in the sense of our educational system. When you have young people waiting up to 2 years to get into a nursing school, when we know when they come out they'll get a job immediately in the fastest growing industry in our state, we have to re-engineer our education system to meet the needs of today and think about the long term. And so education to me is a high priority. When you talk about the fiscal, I'd rope the PERS in there too, that we have to have as a long-term fiscal plan that is stable and not an ongoing battle every single year. And on PERS, there's one other piece, and that is the issue of defined benefits versus defined contribution. I call it 5 and out. If you talk to public safety people, they work 5 years. A lot of them are leaving after 5 years, going to the lower 48 to get a better benefit because we have a 401k basically. So we spend lots of money in the state government training people to be better troopers, better public safety people to go work somewhere else. That is not the right way to do this business, and we need to incorporate that conversation. On the capital, I've laid out an idea. You know, we spending, and the governor and I will agree that there needs to be capital, but we really have to think about this. If you think about us being always poor and unable to do it, we'll never do it. But we spend about an average $140 million in these tough times on capital. I would take 70 to 100 million out, like every local government does, every business does, and I'd leverage that on a 6-year community-grown capital project list over the next 6 years and do debt financing, which could probably raise between $2 to $3 billion. Pace it over 6 years, so you make sure you don't. Because when you nickel and dime with GF funds, you never get them done. That's how I would do the infrastructure program.
Senator, I'll know to question 4. We'll begin with Senator Begich. What would you do to ensure stable, sustainable revenue sharing, if anything?
Well, first off, I believe in revenue sharing. I think it's important. As local communities, you have the brunt of the cost of government in a lot of ways because you see stuff that the state government or the federal government no longer does, and you have to pick up pieces and pay some of the bills. How you do revenue sharing, what that amount is, I couldn't tell you today. Do I believe in it? Absolutely. Should it be part of any fiscal plan for the state, the long-term stability of our state? Absolutely. If you look at the long-term fiscal plans that have been laid out there, you got 3 components. One, as I mentioned earlier, we have to deal with this permanent fund dividend issue, or again, every single year, all the debate is how much the dividend will be instead of focus on the long term. Second, I'll give you some examples in state government that drive me crazy that I hear every single day from my people. One example, public services, when you go, public assistance, when you go to their facility right now, they have 2 computer systems running side by side for the last 3.5 years. Why? Because they're afraid that the older system or the newer system may not work. Well, you actually should just get rid of the contractors who have given you these 2 products because that is an outrageous expenditure because the people are spinning their wheels. If you are an OCS worker and you're going out to do a site visit, you do it all by hand because they're afraid that someone might hack into the iPad. Well, the reality is when they do it by hand, they got to paying for the revenues we put into local government.
Sharing now what's called community assistance. Receive $10,000, but that may be the biggest chunk of money that they receive. And so when the smaller communities would lose that, that would be unsustainable and they would just not exist. So we've got to maintain that program, which we will, of course. But it just gets back to the core issue. We have to have a full fiscal plan. We have to decide. I liken it to we've been eating off a menu for 40 years with no prices. Now we have to decide what we're going to eat, and what kind of a state we want, and how we're going to pay. A lot of people don't want to say to play that, generate the revenue to pay for these things. And so the more we go, continue down the path of, cutting this and cutting that, more rolls down, deficits roll downhill. They roll down to local governments. And so I think we need to take a page from local governments. When you need additional revenues, you figure out how to do it. And you don't run from it. You figure it out. So, revenue sharing is and community assistance is critical, but it's all part of the big picture of we've got to fix our fiscal situation in Alaska once and for all. It's not a matter of just surviving another downturn. Let's, when we fixed 80% of it, we fixed 80% of it. Let's fix the other 20%, and let's never be here again. Let's make sure that we're in control of our future. Sure, we have revenue sharing going forth.
5 will begin with Governor Walker.
Alaska. Anyone who's in Alaska today, Pentagon for big equipment guys up there. It's really amazing what they do. So Alaska is a resource state. We have $4.7 trillion of resources in the ground, and it's up to us that we know of. It's up to us to develop it. And that's one of the reasons that I ran for governor, is I was tired of sitting back waiting for our resources to be developed by somebody and maybe we can live off of them. So, we're the only state that owns the resources in the ground and up north on the gas side and on the oil. And so we need to be more involved in that. So that's why I spent time in China, to look at not just on the gas side, but on all of our resources, what we can develop in Alaska. So that project will happen. We finally have the right relationships with the market to make that happen. It'll be phenomenal what it'll do for Alaska. My background was, going to work as a carpenter on the Trans-Alaska Oil Pipeline and a teamster and a laborer, and it was life-changing for me. And so I want to have that same opportunity for the next generation of Alaskans that can have that same opportunity. But it's a matter of us being a sovereign. It's a matter of us stop waiting for the phone to ring. I'm not a big believer of waiting for the phone to ring and hope it's the good news. I'm a big believer getting on an airplane, going somewhere and sitting down with someone and telling them about Alaska. Alaska sells itself, but you got to go sometimes and sit down with them and say, here's what you need to do. And we're going to see some announcements coming out soon that's going to be, you're going to be pleased with, as far as what's going to happen in Alaska as far as some of our neighbors. I'd go visit Governor Heckle. Every time he'd take me into his office and he'd say, look at Alaska on a globe from the top down. What do you see? You see Asia. You don't see Florida. You don't see San Diego. So Asia has been our market for a long time. It'll continue to be our market of opportunity.
Thank you. Senator?
Simple answer, yes, I support it. I think it's an important project. It's a project for many of us that have been hoping and dreaming about this for many, many years. There's a lot of progress that's been made. I think the only thing I would say to it is a concern that I have is just dealing with one country, and I know there's efforts to deal with others. You got to have multiple players in the mix in order to create competition of how it's for Alaska will finance it, what controls they will have over the Alaska project. But the larger issue, and the governor talked a little bit about it too, and that's energy. Alaska has a unique opportunity. We have unique places all around the state in regards to renewable energy. The goal of the state is try to get to 50% renewable energy consumption by 2025. They've had that goal for many years, and it's going to be tough to get there by 2025. But I can tell you, when I look at places like Kodiak and see the impact they've had on renewable energy and the lower cost that they can produce, or myself when I was mayor, and now we produce methane gas out of our landfill cheaper than natural gas can be purchased, and utilizing it to fuel the military base there. When you go up to rural Alaska and you see these incredible wind turbines that are moving new energy and lower cost, is important for us. But the other piece of this that we forget as we think about this new energy opportunity for Alaska, we also have to make sure we have the people working in these fields. When you have wind turbines, we don't want to import people from out of state to maintain them, which is what is happening today. We should be re-engineering our educational system at the university to make sure we are training young people not only to build these facilities, but to maintain them. That's the long-term value. And I think in state government, what happens is it's always about a project, but it's not about all the pieces to make it possible long-term. What I'll remember is when the federal government years ago said we're going to go to LED lights, everyone wanted to do is save energy, but we never thought about the next step. And who now produces most of them? China, instead of the US. Because you got to think when you do a project, what are the pieces down the line that we can incorporate to benefit us?
Thank you. We'll now go to question 6, which is a series of 4 questions, and we'll begin with Senator Begich. Do you support ballot measure 1? And if so, yes, or if you say no, would you give us reasons why, please?
Sure. I have not taken a position. I do believe it should be on the ballot. I think the courts have taken out some of the more problematic pieces of it. What I mean by that is issues that some were concerned about. So on ballot number 1, I'm glad that the voters get a chance to vote on this. But bigger picture on this issue is there was a piece of legislation that could have been worked on fixing Title 16. That's what this is all about. Because it was pre-statehood this legislation was put in place, and it seems like a lot has changed in statehood. But the legislature took no action on it. Then result is the public decided to go and get an initiative done. That's the process we have. Now, it's amazing, there was another initiative in process, which was about per diem for legislators, how much they'll get paid when they don't finish the session on time, how much they won't get paid. That initiative was moving forward with signatures. But the legislature miraculously had all the time in the world to fix that, because the law is, if you do a piece of legislation that corresponds or is close to the ballot initiative, you don't have to have the ballot initiative. So that's why we're not going to vote on that initiative, because the legislators saw that as a problem for them, and they decided to fix it. Where this other issue in Title 16 is to make sure that when we have major projects, that we're also taking into account the process of ensuring that our salmon, our fish, are protected for the long term as one of our best renewable industries and resources. The current bill, or the initiative, has a lot of process. And we want to make sure it doesn't add more time, but make sure the public is more engaged. So, for example, you pull a permit for a large project, the public should know about it. That's what this initiative does. When you do a project like this, you should actually make sure they have proper bonding. That's what this initiative does. When you have mitigation requirements, you actually have to have measurable measures to make sure they are done. So, in my view, I'm glad the public has an opportunity to vote on it. I'm glad the courts have resolved it and will move forward, but the legislature failed to do their job.
Thank you. Governor Walker.
You know, because it's on the initiative on the ballot, I've been cautioned about speaking about it. I appreciate that caution. I'm going to tell you how I feel about it. I'm voting no on it. The reason I'm going to vote no on it is because I worry about what that's going to do for Alaska, what's going to do for development in Alaska, what's going to do for jobs in Alaska. You know, initiative is sort of a blunt instrument, and when you're creating those kind of laws with initiative process, there's no opportunity for public hearings, no opportunity for debate back and forth. I am a solid no on this. Now, I also am aware that in the past there's been processes to make sure local governments have input and aware of projects that are happening, and certainly there can work can be done in that area. But as the initiative stands now, I think it's going to significantly negatively impact development of Alaska. I am very pro-fish. There's no question about that. I came out and solidly my concern about the Pebble Mine. But that doesn't mean that we should overlay a process like this over our existing laws and regulations. I think we do a pretty darn good job of looking out for Alaska. There's a process to improve that, and I'm certainly willing to work with those with the initiative, assuming that it fails, to bring back some of their concerns. But I met with some of the funders from this. The ones I met with are all from outside of Alaska. You know, I was born here, I'm going to die here, and I'm a little bit protective of Alaska. So when those come in and bring money in to make it more difficult or expensive for us to have an economy here, I'm sorry, I have to stand up and say I don't support that process at all.
Thank you, Governor. The next question is, do you support continued and/or increasing funding of the Alaska Marine Highway System? And Governor Walker, will ask you that first.
Well, I absolutely do. I'm sitting here looking at Shirley Marquardt, who is very much a part of that. So I am very, very supportive of the Alaska Marine Highway System. You know, I think that my time in Valdez, Byron from Yakutat, we do have a road. They don't out of Yakutat. We understand the importance of the Alaska Marine Highway System. We put together a task force of Alaskans. You know, I got tired of seeing people hired from out of state to come in and tell us how to run something, and so we have a bunch of Alaskans that have put together some recommendations on how to make that run better. Maybe as a separate government entity of some sort, similar to the Alaska Railroad is one of the concepts looking at. You know, how do you bring down the costs? You know, the critical thing in those that depend upon the Marine Highway System is it going to be there when it says it's going to be there? Is a schedule really mean a schedule? And that's really one of the biggest challenges. One of the things we're looking at doing is the fuel in British Columbia, they've converted over to liquefied natural gas in British Columbia, and they've cut their fuel costs for their marine highway system in half. So we're saying, is that an option that we can do? What can we do to bring down the cost? But we had the christening last Saturday or before that. The First Lady broke a bottle of champagne in Ketchikan at the shipyard, and it was a pretty proud moment to have the very first Alaska Marine Highway System ferry built in Alaska
access to our apartments because of that, because I knew what they were going through. So Medicaid expansion is important. It makes, in other words, that I would not have a chance to probably win, but I knew it was the right thing to do. And sometimes you got to do that. An experimental program and say to family practitioners, you know what, we're going to pay your average salary, get their services. Only 4% don't because of that service is.
You'll stay here and you'll not leave, or if you do, you'll come back again. So we would definitely be very much in favor of continuing that program.
Senator Bigot?
Thank you very much. It's a great question. Ever since I've been involved in government in some way, my first commission that I served on was the Youth Commission for Anchorage, because it was a place that we could have a voice as a young person about what we needed in our community. But I've carried that every year I've served in any type of public service and in my private. It's putting people in places of opportunity to give good ideas and good policy for us. That's what I would do as governor.
Thank you. And Mackenzie?
Hello, I'm Mackenzie Marisol. Sorry, I'm really short. If you knew you were looking at the future governor of Alaska, what advice would you give me?
Say it again.
If you knew you were looking at the future governor of Alaska, what advice would you give me?
Very good question. First off, have very good thick skin. I would tell you also serve on an Anchorage Assembly or City Council, because once you've survived that, everything is a piece of cake after that, guaranteed. But also, for people who may not know this, I did not graduate from college. 5 brothers and sisters, we had a challenge in our family. I was fortunate to help them move on to higher education. I chaired the Post-Secondary Education Commission for State of Alaska for 7 years. 7 years, Student Loan Corporation I chaired. I could not go on to higher education, but I am a big advocate. And why I say this is, never let anybody tell you you cannot do anything. There's one thing about Alaska, and anywhere really, and that is, if you have the desire, the motivation, and a few ideas, you can do about anything you want. That business I mentioned at the age of 16, I opened up the first non-alcoholic teenage nightclub in Anchorage because no one else was doing it, and I was sick and tired of seeing kids getting in trouble, and I did not want to get in trouble. I wanted a safe, clean environment. People thought I was crazy. We did it. And I think that's what you have to always think about when you're running. You'll always have challenges on the budget. Don't overthink it. Go with your gut sometimes. Believe in what you want to do. And never be afraid to get advice from people that tell you, that's not a great idea. And then you take it in. At the end of the day, you're always going to be responsible for your decisions. Surround yourself with people who are contrarians at times. People who have worked for me more than half the time are people I don't know. I hate to say this, most resumes I never look at. When they come to interview with me, my first question is, why do you want to work for me? And then they tell me a lot about them. I'm a tournament poker player. Not that I would recommend that to you, but it teaches you a lot about people. And one thing that's important is, how do you listen to people and hear what they're really feeling and seeing? And don't just read about it, experience it. And that will make you a better public servant as a governor or anything you want to do. That's what I would give you.
Thank you. Governor Walker?
Well, I think I am looking at another governor from the state of Alaska. The fact that you have verbalized this is the first step. So congratulations on that. I recently saw a presentation at the it was in-service day for the Anchorage School District, and there was a slide that was put up that said, if you have a dream and a vision, and when you tell it to somebody, nobody snickers, it's not big enough. Here you got a round of applause. So I would say you're on the right track. I would say set your goals as high as you want to. I do think it's very good to have a local government experience, though. I think that is, I think the purest form of government in our society is local government, because you're closest to the people. And so as you move out from that, it becomes a bit more challenging. So I would say get involved in local government first, because it's a tremendous foundation on moving forward. But also, don't give up. Absolutely do not give up on anything. I'm a big believer in that. Not going through my own personal situation and story, but when I first ran, the first poll that came out showed that I had a 2% name recognition, and in my company, everybody came in and said, "Well, I guess you can forget that." I said, 2%? That's awesome. Who would have thought I have a 2% name recognition? We could do something with this, and we just got up earlier and stayed up later than the other person and got it done. Hard work. Good luck always follows hard work. You cannot schedule opportunity. You need to take advantage of opportunities. You work hard. You set your goal out there. Do not ever be deterred by what somebody else tells you about what you can and can't do. There's no limitation that once you set your sights on something. I'll look forward to reading about you being sworn in.
Thank you, Governor. Caleb, you have the next question, please.
Hi, I'm Caleb Graham. There is only one operating coal mine in the entire state of Alaska, and yet there are 4 full-time state employees exclusively employed to regulating coal mining. Would you disagree or agree that there are areas of the state government that should be reduced as part of fiscal management before cutting things like education and road management?
Governor Walker?
I'm
sorry.
sorry, I didn't quite hear that last part.
Would you agree that there are areas within our state government that should be reduced as part of fiscal management plan before capping or tapping the permanent fund and education?
Sure. Well, here's what we did. First of all, you're right about the coal mine. This is a phenomenal location, and I thoroughly enjoyed that today. I'm still excited about what I witnessed and riding that big truck that made a cat grader look like a toy. Looking down at it was pretty amazing. What we did was this. When we were faced with a $3.7 billion deficit, what we did is we reduced spending by $1.7 billion. We closed 40 state facilities. We laid off or did not fill 3,000 state positions. There's 100 state programs that were either completely eliminated or reduced. So we have done a significant amount of reduction. Our budget now is the lowest it's been since 2007. So we have brought it down significantly in the situation that we're in. We absolutely would not involve it. It becomes unsustainable. 25 troopers in just one region of Alaska right now. You know, we have shortages that, you know, we're becoming a different Alaska than I was born into. So I'm concerned, and they're not getting the work done. They're frustrated. The public, you know, when is enough, and I think we're pretty darn close to that at this point.
News and bad news. The bad news is everyone's going to have to reapply for their jobs or restructuring the library system. You can imagine the moan and groan. The headline in the paper was 22 librarians laid off by baggage. That's not a good headline, let me tell you, especially when your mother calls and complains. So what did we do? We restructured it to make it grow rather than keep what they've been doing, cutting. End result, today, the library system, after 5 years when I was mayor, we opened for the first time Mountain View Library that had been closed for 25 years. We opened up a new library in Eagle River, Mountain View, or Girdwood, Muldoon. Restructured, created a library foundation that supports it, created new ways to manage the library system, created new partners. Today, that library system is thriving and no longer on the chopping block. So state government has not had this because they spend too much time every year whacking away at it. They don't spend enough time looking at how do you reinvent it to deliver better services and more quality. And as mayors and local government people, you have to do this all the time. I did it with many departments when I was mayor of Anchorage, and that's what I would bring to the governor's office.
Thank you, Senator. And our last youth question is from Gavin. If you would, and this goes to Senator Biggett.
All right. Good evening. My name is Gavin Mortensen. My question today is, crime in Alaska has become a priority issue. Can you describe 3 actions you would take as governor to make Alaska safer and reduce the rate of crime?
Absolutely. It was the first policy paper I put out. You can, again, go to my website, got to self-promote here, baggage.com, lays out a lot more detail. I had to do the same thing when I was mayor of Anchorage. We had a growing crime problem, gang problem, drug problem, but we attacked it. We didn't plan some big task force. We have to have a much more robust recruitment effort than what they're doing today.
No, the crime in Alaska took a short. We put together an instance on that as far as what some passed, but basically they did intercepts on that. We've been very, very successful on our interceptions. A drug illegal, rather than going through the legislative process, we're much quicker getting more funding. Yes, we need to have, and we're doing that. We received another $30 million of funding this year, 12 of which is going to go to local communities.
And as you know, former Senator Don Levy is not here. We'll give those questions to him as well. and share with the AML. I think that's it. Okay, so we've got some questions. I think this is a fairly interesting one, and Governor Walker, we'll begin with you. As governor or senator, an elected official, what was your biggest mistake, and what action would you do over?
Well, typically when I make a mistake, I do it over right away, and and I did. We had a process that on an administrative order on the Commercial Fisheries Entry Commission and how to handle. We forgot. We did not reach.
We might be here all night. Let me, this one is not hard for me to remember because I have the tire tracks on me still. For those that might remember, I had this small little idea. I got it from a community neighborhoods near elementary schools. There's a small little program called Photo Radar. It was painful. I thought it would be a good idea to slow down traffic next to elementary school. We wouldn't have to use police officers, highly paid. We could use these camera things, and that went crazy, went haywire. There was an initiative, went to court. And what I learned from that, don't do photo radar. But also what was important, there's another side one too, just a side other issue. Someone came to me and said, Mark, why do dogs have to get licensed and cats do not in Anchorage? And I thought, well, maybe cats should. Well, that was 3 nights of public hearings. So I'm all for cats. No more licensing, ever. Matter of fact, we'll pay them not the license. So you learn from these experiences. That's the most important thing. What did you do with those experiences? Had business failures and successes. Same thing in politics often, and maybe you weren't. Or maybe you had an idea and your ego got wrapped around it. But you try to listen better and try to engage people in a different way. That's what I learned from these experiences. And even though the tire tracks are still on my back, they've gotten covered slowly over time. But it does remind you that not every idea is a good idea, and you always have to be thinking about them a lot. So I've had mistakes and made them over the years, and these are two that emblazoned in my mind.
Thank you both. Would you increase support to the Alaska Seafood Marketing Institute and the Alaska Travel Industry Association? And if yes, why? And if no, why not? Senator Begich?
These are two, yes, but I would also make sure that we have good partnerships. When I was in the U.S. Senate, we created a program called Brand USA, which is the first time we utilized money from visas to match against private sector to help promote the country, the only Western country that didn't promote itself to other countries, to actually fund an incredible program that now is self-sustaining and promotes the country in a lot of ways. I would, on both of these are both great industries for us. Tourism business continues to grow every single day, and people, wife who is selling smokes today, she owns sources, but partnering aggressively with the challenge with China, the issues of around the world. They don't sell all their, no matter when you can tell, yummy chummy smile with the pride on them, and really they're that are aggressive for us. So I would definitely put resources, but partner with the private sector to make sure we do it right.
Thank you. Walker?
Through the industry itself. They have received state funding in the past, but they, as an industry, have put a certain amount of their so many cents per pound into their own marketing system, and they do a phenomenal job at it. I've been at a number of events around the world that they have hosted, and they do a phenomenal job of that. You must be present to win when you're out in the marketing business, and going out there and selling in Alaska, they do a phenomenal job of that. I was at a event at the Ambassador Branstad's residence in Beijing, and it was catered by ASME, and watching the group of be there to do that. On